Hey everyone, it's Christine Garvin and welcome to Hormonally Speaking. Glad to have you here with us today. I actually asked one of my previous guests who was on a few months ago, Rebecca Sairs, to come back and chat with us a little bit more. So if you didn't have a chance to listen to her episode, it was all about PMDD. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I highly recommend it. There's so much amazing information about that. The differences between it and PMS, and sort of trying to figure out if that's something that you have, because a lot of women that have it don't actually know that they have it. So one of the things that happened after Rebecca and I recorded that episode is we delved more into her own personal story, which I realized we didn't get recorded on that original episode. So I really wanted her to come back and talk about her story, because I think it's so important for women that are going through this to connect to someone who has really felt their pain and really understands it, and has worked through it in this different level, and that she's a great person to work with if that's something that you're suffering from. So quick overview of Rebecca. She's a registered yoga teacher and certified health coach who specializes in helping women ditch their PMDD symptoms naturally. She does this by empowering women to make lasting food and lifestyle changes so that they can feel happy and like themselves all month long. Rebecca believes that a woman should be the PMDD boss of her well-being, and she strives to help her clients keep their power when making decisions around their health. Rebecca is certified through the Integrative Women's Health Institute, studied under Nicole Jardim in her fixed-year period apprenticeship, and is currently working on her national board certification in health and wellness coaching. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yay, I'm so glad that you could come back and share your story with us, since we didn't, get into that last time on the air, as I just mentioned. But before we jump into that, for those that haven't heard about PMDD, that haven't listened to that previous episode yet, can you give us a quick overview of what it's all about?
Yeah, so most likely they've heard of PMS, and it is similar to PMS in that you get symptoms right before your period, and there often can be physical symptoms and moody symptoms. Anxiety, rage, depression are really common, but they are so bad that they are debilitating. You often can't go to work or school. You have a hard time in relationships. Like, you might try to break up or divorce with your husband every time during that time, or you just kind of isolate socially. So it's really bad symptoms right before your period that make it hard to function. It's kind of the nutshell version of PMDD. And it's considered a hormonal mood disorder.
Right. I remember learning that last time talking to you. I was surprised that, it was in the DMS 4 or 5, one of
Yeah.
those. Yeah.
Yeah.
The most recent one.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, is a good thing in terms of society, I guess, understanding the impact of it, right? It's not
Yes.
just this thing that I think a lot of times PMS gets just kind of shoved under the carpet, or it's like, oh, that's just every woman goes through that, which is not, doesn't make it normal anyway. But
Right.
it's just something that it can easily kind of be pushed to the side, versus PMDD. It's like, okay, well, this is something kind of more valid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and even PMS, I would argue, is valid in the way
absolutely.
that, like, your symptoms are real, but
Absolutely.
you're right. Sometimes you can kind of push them aside or work through it. Whereas PMDD, you're just kind of out and you really can't just push through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so give us a little, window into how your story has been with PMDD. Let's start at the beginning. When did you start noticing PMDD symptoms?
Yeah. So, I want to preface this with my story includes a lot of medications, and I'm not saying that you should or should not take medications. It just happens to be in my story. So that said, this seems weird, but I want to start when I was 3.
All
And the
right.
reason I know it's
Go
like,
way
what,
back.
you weren't having a period when you were 3. But when I was 3, I had chronic ear infections and I was on antibiotics for a year. And then jumping forward to my teens, I had bad acne. So they put me on antibiotics again. And then I started having painful periods, irregular periods. So eventually in my late teens, they put me on the birth control pill. And even before they put me on the birth control pill, I was starting to notice that I was getting a little moody, a little bit sad, a little bit anxious, but I didn't think too much of it. And then I got put on the birth control pill and I was like, this is amazing. Like I have clear skin, I have a quote, regular period.
Right.
Um, makes your boobs big. Woohoo, all the things
All the
like
good stuff.
why wouldn't you want to be on birth control
Right.
pill? Um, and during that time, so that was probably 18, 19. And I was just moved to college and started experiencing a lot of anxiety. I would like go in the shower and cry. There was this little prayer closet upstairs in my dorm. I'd like hide from people because I couldn't be around people. And yeah, crying was a big one for me. I would just cry all the time. And I didn't connect it to my cycle. I didn't connect it to the birth control pill. I was just like, didn't really know what was going on. And after college, I started teaching and I was working probably like 70 hours a week. I was super stressed out. I was still on birth control. And I remember one day after school, all the kids were gone. And I called my OBGYN and I was like, I've heard that they make a birth control pill that helps with anxiety and helps with moodiness. Can I get on that one? And she's like, you're already on it. And
Oops.
I
You're
was
like,
like,
uh-oh.
what? And I remember like hanging up the phone and just like bursting into tears because I was like, what am I going to do if I'm on the one that supposedly helps with your moods?
Right.
So eventually I got off of birth control altogether and I still was moody. And I went on antibiotics again because I had acne, but I was like, I don't really want to be on the pill. I didn't need it for contraceptive at that point. So I went back on antibiotics. I then moved to another country to teach internationally. So, you have like stressful things like culture shock. I'm still teaching, which is a stressful job. And then you're in a new country. So you pick up different what's the word, like sicknesses. Like I had giardia and you're
Oh
placed
yeah.
on birth
Charity is the one that'll get you, right? Whenever you
I
go
know,
abroad, it seems like, yeah.
right? It's not a fun one, but then you get put on antibiotics
Yeah.
again. And
Yeah.
so, this constant stream of medications. And I got to a point in Bolivia where I was just crying all the time. I would go to school and just like start crying and I couldn't stop. Like some days I would go home because like I couldn't be there. And I flew home one winter break and I talked to my doctor and I was like, I'm crying all the time. I'm so sad. I'm really anxious. Like, what do I do? And he's like, well, we can put you on an SSRI. It sounds like you're depressed. So I start the SSRI and at first it maybe helped a little bit,
Mhm.
but then I started waking up and I didn't want to be alive anymore.
Mm,
And I
wow.
wasn't suicidal, but I was very much, yeah, I didn't want to be here. And I was like, I can't believe I'm going to have to do this being life for another like
Mm.
50 years. Um, so I found a therapist in Bolivia and she was like, you might be, that might be a side effect of the SSRI. And actually, I forgot a part. Before I saw my doctor in the States, before I was on the SSRI, during this time in Bolivia, I started getting really irrational thoughts. So I would think that I was the ugliest person in the world and that I needed to get plastic surgery, and then that I needed to move to another country and start my life over because I didn't want to tell my friends and family that I was going to get plastic surgery. And like, I believe this to be true. And like, looking
Yeah.
back, I'm like, what? You know? Um,
It's like something else took over.
right. Like, it
Yeah.
really wasn't me. And I didn't tell anybody about that at the time. I kept it very secret, but I would like research it and like find places where I could get this done and like, okay, how much money do I need? Like, I legit thought
Yeah.
this was like a real thing I needed to do.
Yeah.
So that also led me to my doctor,
Mm-hmm.
which led to the SSRI, which led to waking up and being like, I don't want to be alive anymore, which then led me to the therapist who was like, I think maybe the SSRI is causing some of these feelings of wanting to be alive. So she helped me find a psychiatrist who helped me slowly taper off the SSRI so I didn't get the big side
Right. The
effects.
wallop. Yeah.
Yeah. So I finally was off the SSRI, but
Not
in
feeling any
Bolivia,
better?
well, not completely. And in Bolivia, you can buy birth control just on the street. So
Mm.
I, being in my 20s, and you know how you are in your 20s, you just do whatever. I
You're
would
like,
go
give
and,
it to me. Make it
right.
better. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I would go and buy birth control off the street. I have no idea what kind I was taking.
Mm.
Um, so I was on that for a little bit, and then I moved back to the States, and I was off my birth control. I was off SSRIs, but I was still getting this anxiety, this depression. I would like hide in my closet because I'd be on the verge of panic. And I don't know, for some reason, small spaces seem to like help. I don't know.
Mm.
So I went and saw an OBGYN in the States, and she was the one who was like, you might have PMDD. So she prescribed a SSRI for the last 2 weeks of your cycle. And that's a common thing. If you have PMDD, you can take an SSRI for 2 weeks
Wow.
before your period and then get off of it. So she did that. And then she's like, look into your thyroid because I have some history with, or family history rather, with it and a few symptoms. And that is definitely something to check out if you have PMDD because the symptoms can mimic each other.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I went and saw an endocrinologist, and she put me on 2 different types of thyroid medications. And throughout this time, I'm still moody. I'm still having my anxiety. I'm still like trying to break up with my boyfriend every month. Like the poor guy. He's my husband now, but like
He held on
poor
tight.
guy.
He made it
Yeah,
through.
he did. He deserves a medal or something. Um, so, and then I started twitching, and everyone's like, what do you mean twitching? So like my legs would like twitch, or sometimes it's in my shoulders, sometimes it's in my face. And there's definitely a connection to stress. Like the more stressed I am, the more likely I am to start twitching. And it can, like if I have an itch somewhere in my body, sometimes I twitch, or if something startles me, sometimes I twitch. And I've gotten it checked out by a neurologist and had tests run, and I'm quote normal. So they've not been able to figure it out, and supposedly it's not caused by any medication. So, and I haven't been on medication for maybe 7 years now, and I still twitch. So,
Do you think it's related to adrenal function at all?
ooh, I don't know. I mean, possibly, because I feel like
I was
it
just
is,
thinking, that kind of startled reaction a lot of
yeah,
times is an adrenal thing, and so
yeah,
if that, I mean, I
yeah.
haven't necessarily heard of that being a common thing with adrenal stuff, but that was kind of the first thing that popped in my mind.
Yeah, no, I should explore that because I'm not sure. And I definitely know it is like stress related because
Yeah.
times of high stress, I'll just start multiple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and let's see. Yeah, so I started this twitching, and I was kind of like, you know what? I've had enough. And right about that same time, my boyfriend, now husband, sent me this email by Alyssa Vitti.
Hmm.
Do you know if that's how you
Hmm.
say your name?
Hmm. I think
And
that's how you say it. Yeah.
yeah, and it was about low libido because, of course, that's what he's concerned about. Um,
That's how you get them on board.
right, right. So, and I open it up, and it's, basically how to use food and lifestyle to help some of your hormonal dysfunction. And I think I was finally to the point where I was ready to hear that.
Hmm.
Up until that point, I was very much of the belief that my body is broken. I need medications to fix it. My doctors know best, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But I'd finally had all of these side effects, and I was just like, you know what? I'm done.
Yeah.
So I stopped all of my medications, and I bought her book, and I followed her woman code
Hmm.
protocol or whatever. And I can't say that it changed my life because it didn't,
Hmm.
but it was like my first baby step to
Hmm.
like, let's figure this out a different way.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah. So after that, I found a functional doctor that I worked with, and that was super helpful because she helped me work on my gut health, my nutrient deficiencies, which I'd had from, being on antibiotics and
Yep.
multiple medications for years, not to mention a really poor diet.
Yeah.
I would, yeah, I was the queen of carbs and cheese and anything processed. So, a combo of that, working on balancing my blood sugar, finding foods that didn't really work with my body, like those types of things. I ended up supplementing a little bit with amino acids like GABA, 5-HTP, those kind of things as well.
Mhm.
But that was kind of the thing that led me to where I am now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think that's such an important point to make that, and I know for me, for a long time, I kind of thought food and, whatever, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what'll stick in terms of
mm,
supplements
yeah,
would do everything. And it's part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture,
right.
right?
I
And
agree.
and
Yeah.
and I think, I get it. Like food is medicine, and there's a whole swarm of people that are like, I just need certain foods and everything will be okay. But I don't really find that that's the case for the most
Yeah.
part with clients, right? We need
Yeah.
we need a little bit more, especially when our bodies are so depleted. And I want to point to the points of your story, or the aspects of your story that like I can relate to. And I also think that I hope women that are listening to this can think back in their own lives, because I think we don't think about the amount of antibiotics that we've taken, and that
Mm-hmm.
mutilating our beneficial bacteria, and that it's
Yeah.
not that easy to reinstate that
Yeah.
bacteria, right? I mean, I had my kind of first uh, deep dive into health issues after 3 rounds of antibiotics in college for strep throat, and then I
Mm-hmm.
graduated from college, which was very stressful because I didn't know what I wanted to do next.
Yeah.
And I always say that like my stomach fell out, like I
Mm,
literally, within a week of graduating, I had so much diarrhea. And it was like
yeah.
within 3 weeks, I think I lost 15 or 20 pounds, And at the time, the only thing that was told to me was, oh, IBS, doctor
Yeah.
has IBS. And of course, over the next few years when I started studying this stuff, I really understood the impact of those antibiotics that I took, those 3 rounds of antibiotics. And then before that, looking back, high school, I definitely had yeast infections, when I was like 16. And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously there was already something going on with a messed up microbiome at that point. And I had crazy. I mean, when you're talking about crying all the time, I was like, that was like my entire
Yeah.
teenage years and most of college,
Yeah.
and just very pessimistic about so many things in life.
Yeah.
And you think that that's just you, right?
Yeah.
And then I you see women who hit their 30s or their 40s and start having super duper obvious hormonal complications, and they're like, I don't understand where this came from. And it's like, it is all of that is
Yeah.
all of that stuff. So I'm really glad you started age 3.
I know it's ridiculous,
No,
but
but
I
it's so
feel like it
true.
plays a part. Yeah.
It's a huge part, and I think so many people do not take that into consideration. And I'm sure that you're the same in working with your clients, that we go through the health history with our
Yep.
clients to really note all those times so that you can see how this puzzle really came together, right?
Yeah.
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 So after you started seeing the functional medicine practitioner, what are some of the things that you really felt like started to shift things in a bigger way?
Well, I think food in a way did
Mhm,
help,
mhm,
um, because food can contribute to moodiness as
mhm,
well, depending on the person. So, there's some evidence that gluten can have an effect on some
mhm,
people's moods, as well as dairy, especially in the case of like histamine, which I think we chatted a little bit
mhm,
about before. But if you have too much, it can lead to anxiety. So I think that did help. But because I was so nutrient deficient at the
mhm,
time of just changing my food, it wasn't enough. So it's
mhm,
like you said, it's the whole picture. And I think blood sugar instability was also a big part of my story. And it's all of these things I don't feel like are talked about enough with PMDD,
mhm,
because the cause of PMDD is that you have an abnormal response to normal levels of hormones,
mhm,
which at the same time, you can have all these other things like the food, um, what's the word? Like a sensitivity to food that might be
mhm,
contributing to mood, or if your blood sugar is unstable, that's going to contribute to mood. So that was a big thing for me too, because like I
mhm,
said, I had days in college where I was like, all I ate today was 4 bowls of cereal.
mhm,
And
mhm.
even quote healthy cereal
Yeah.
is not going to really balance your blood sugar. So that
I,
was,
I have to just interrupt you here for a
yeah.
second because I almost died the other day. There's some RD. I don't really know her, but she came up on a Facebook ad. And if you look at her stuff, she's pretty quote unquote, holistic or natural. But she is shilling, I think it was Raisin Bran. It was some kind of cereal like that because of the high fiber content. And I was
Mm,
like, girlfriend, I cannot believe that you're doing this.
yeah.
You are telling women to eat Raisin Bran first
Yeah.
thing in the morning, which
Yeah.
is, I will just say it, is like the worst possible thing you could do for your hormones and your blood sugar. I mean, and they're
Yeah.
interrelated.
Yeah.
You're just nosediving your blood sugar levels for the day, starting off with that. I
Right.
was just like, I can't even believe, like, I'm sorry. That's, yeah, not cool to tell people that.
Yeah, I know,
that
but I feel like we're led to believe that, healthy cereal is like a great way to start the day, but anyway.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and the point that you made about blood sugar too, I, this is kind of fresh because I was just talking about it with a client earlier. It's like, I think people hear about their blood sugar levels, and also some doctors will look at blood sugar levels that are much higher and say
mm,
that they're okay than
yeah,
what a functional medicine practitioner or health coach or whatever would look at and say is okay, right?
yeah,
And then we know that that is intricately connected with your cortisol production too, right?
mm-hmm,
So you have this high blood sugar that's going to make you release more insulin, and this is going to impact your cortisol, and that cortisol production is going to impact your progesterone production.
mm-hmm,
And so it's this very immediate and intricate link on this very basic level of your blood sugar, and
yeah,
what you eat impacts your blood sugar more than anything else does, though of
yeah,
course stress plays a huge role.
yeah. And it's all connected, right? Like
Yeah.
nothing is in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Everything's connected. And yeah, going back to like stress, one of the things I remember at the first appointment, my functional doctor was like, okay, we're gonna, give you some supplements, work on your diet, etc. But you really need to work on your stress. Because at
Mm-hmm.
the time I was still teaching and moved a ton. So I was pretty stressed. And she's like, go to yoga or find a mindfulness practice or something.
Mhm.
And being a teacher and being frugal, I was like, okay, I'm going to get the 1 month pass at the
Yeah.
yoga studio. It's only $45. If I go every day, it's only a couple dollars a class. So I did. I started going every day.
Wow.
And I remember there was this one class on Sundays, and I was the youngest person in that class by far because it was a very gentle, restorative class, not really a workout.
Mhm.
And I would leave and I would just be like, oh my gosh, I feel so good. I feel
Mhm.
so calm. Like, this is amazing.
Mhm.
Whereas before I'd practiced yoga and I was kind of like, what's the big deal? Like, it's
Mhm.
fine, but
Mhm.
it's not life changing. Whereas, like, once I started doing it every day
Mhm.
and made it a part of my daily life essentially for a while there, then it did have an impact on me. And then I did notice with my twitching too, is like, whoa, this has diminished
Mhm.
like quite a bit.
Mhm.
So that was another thing. The vitamin deficiency, again, I think was a huge thing.
Yeah. And that's so prevalent without people realizing it,
Yeah.
even if you're eating a really healthy diet, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Mhm.
So I think like vitamin B12, vitamin D, vitamin B6, magnesium, all of these things, if you're low on them, they can also have mood side effects. So it's important to look into that and get that checked out as well.
Yeah. Well, and I
Um,
want to go back to when you mentioned thyroid testing too.
yeah.
I've kind of been in this in a big way recently, and it's really interesting because I had a couple of people reach out to me, possible clients about working on thyroid stuff, and I'm not trained enough in thyroid yet. I'm doing the restorative wellness solutions. It ends up being a year-long program, and the next level is all about thyroid and blood tests and that kind of thing. So I'm really excited about that happening in the fall. But at this point, it's like, well, I don't feel trained enough in that area to
Mm-hmm.
really take on clients that are having these specific like Hashimoto's and things like that. But it was really interesting timing because I was really noticing with myself just more hair loss happening and just swimming through muck, as I like to call it. Like my
Mm,
brain was just, on the struggle bus. And, I had multiple surgeries a year and a half to 2 years ago. And that is going to impact your thyroid function right there.
yeah.
I just want to point that out for people that have had surgeries that, don't tend to think necessarily, but that's really, it's that trauma on your body really goes to your thyroid often,
Yeah.
first and foremost, particularly women. And also giving birth too. Like, that's the thing I think that's not looked at enough after giving birth. But my dad ended up having emergency surgery in January and was in the hospital and uh, in a outpatient, rehab facility for about a month and a half. And just dealing with that was, I was keeping it together out here, but
Yeah.
obviously inside my body, like,
Right. Yeah.
and this is something I wish I would have done before, or excuse me, right after my final surgery, is to get my thyroid tested, not just TSH, not just free T4, but also free T3. Because my TSH actually wasn't great. It was at like 3, and you really want it, between 1 and 2 optimally. And I was taking over the counter raw thyroid glandular at the time, so that was obviously helping somewhat. my
Mm-hmm.
my free T4 was fine. It was actually an optimal range, right? But what I know now is like you really want to know what those free T3 levels are, because that's the active, hormone, thyroid hormone, and that's really going to tell you a whole different picture because you may not be converting well from T4 to T3, right? So I
Yeah.
just ran labs on myself really recently. My TSH was like 5.1. I was like, oh my God, how am I living? And then my T4 again was actually optimal, but low T3. And
Yeah.
this is something I really want to point out to women who are struggling and know that they have thyroid stuff, and like not just the hair falling out, but like the cold hands and feet, the sluggishness, the brain fog. And you get these tests back that are quote unquote normal. Happens
Mm-hmm.
so often, but very often they're not testing that free T3.
Yeah.
And that's such a big component with mood stuff. And I imagine, for a lot of women who suffer from PMDD also. really
Yeah.
getting that thyroid on point is.
Yeah. I would say if your thyroid levels come back, quote, normal,
Mhm.
and you're working with a conventional doctor, then maybe consider finding a functional doctor, because they're going to look for what is optimal. So what's actually going to make you feel good. So they have different ways of viewing it. So if you know something is not right and like deep down you're like, no, I'm not normal, then I would encourage you to keep looking so that you find answers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, I will just say that this is the first time I've been on medication other than what I had to take, after my surgeries for a small amount of time. And I'm grateful for it because I feel in a couple of weeks of taking it, completely different, but
Yeah.
I will just be upfront that, I want people to really do the research and understand that just T4 itself may not do the deed and really help you enough, because the issue might be in that conversion from T4 to T3 to that active hormone. And so, I'm actually taking both, and I think that that's key for me.
Yeah.
So, just do Stop the Thyroid Madness is a great book and site to look at, and of course
Yeah.
there's lots of groups on Facebook. That's tangential, but I kind of wanted to
No, I
bring
think,
that up,
yeah, it's
because
important.
I think, I never would have, I don't think classify myself as having PMDD, but I definitely had extreme PMS and
Mm-hmm.
really intense periods for the
Mm-hmm.
first half of my cycling life,
Yeah.
So I wish I would have known then what I know now.
Right?
So, what do you feel like now in terms of your story? I mean, I want to point out to everyone that this is a never ending process. It's not like you get to the top of the mountain, you're like, yay, everything's perfect and I feel amazing all the time. But what does your life kind of look like now since you've discovered all this stuff and done all this work?
Yeah. So I no longer have like the mood symptoms, the anxiety, the
Mm,
tearfulness, the depression. Rage is a big one with PMDD. I'm very introverted, and I tend to just isolate myself. So
mhm.
I'm not around people. And if something makes me angry, I cry. So
Mm,
the rage thing, like, it's, yes, I would feel rage, but I wouldn't like lash out at people. I would like shut down.
yeah,
Kind of my response to it.
yeah.
Um, but that wasn't your question. But
No,
now
that's all right. I think
I
that's
don't get that
important for
way.
people. Yeah.
So I can still be a little moody and
Mhm.
like, yeah, sure, my husband's can be irritating the day before my
Can't
period,
they
but
all?
yeah, but nothing like, yeah, nothing that keeps me from work, nothing where I am isolating myself from people. Like, I can fully function. So yes, I do still get a little moody, but nothing that is debilitating.
And you said you're
So
off all medication at this point too.
yeah,
Yeah. What
yeah,
is working for you in terms of supplements right now? And I know that that's, constantly shifting and changing, but
yeah.
curious.
Um, right now I'm on a vitamin D just because it's winter and all of that, but that is
And
it.
viruses going around, it's
Right.
a very good time
Yeah,
to take some D. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
That's
And I
all
take
you're
a,
taking.
yeah, that's all I'm taking. And I like take a lot of magnesium baths,
Yeah.
but that's all I'm doing at the moment.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
And what kind of, basic dietary guidelines or whatever are you following?
Um, well, what I tell my clients is first and foremost, eat real food. If you want to
Hmm.
keep it super simple, eat real food that does not come in a box or a package or a wrapper. Um, and then from there, eat so that you balance your blood sugar. So that's going to look like you're going to have fiber, protein, complex carbs, healthy fats at every meal. And then from there, eliminating food that you might be sensitive to. So the common ones like gluten or dairy, and avoiding sugar, those kind of things. So that's basically what I do to keep it super simple. And
Yeah.
it works for me. And sometimes you need a little bit more specificity depending on your situation. But I feel like that is the foundation basic place to start.
Mm-hmm. And I know this may be controversial to say, but I believe that the majority of people gluten and dairy aren't good for,
Yeah.
particularly if there is some hormonal issue going on. Just, I know it's tough. I know it's tough for people to give up the baked goods and to give up
I
the,
know.
the cheese and all of that. And, sometimes with dairy, I see it more often that you can cut dairy out for a while and then bring back in small amounts and it not
Mhm.
impact you as much. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
But with gluten, I just don't see it helpful for really anyone, and people just tend to feel so much better when they take it out in a more long-term way, and that doesn't mean you'll
Mhm.
necessarily notice in a month that you feel so much better because it
Right.
takes a
Right.
while, right, for your gut lining to heal
Yes.
from the damage that is done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
And I think that's really common, like an objection that I hear a lot is like, well, I changed my diet, but it didn't work. And
Hmm.
I always want to like dig a little deeper. Well, what were you doing?
Hmm.
How long were you doing it
Right.
for? And then again, going back to what we said earlier, diet's not the only thing. It
Yeah.
is important, but it's not the only thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How about lifestyle at this point? So you said you were doing yoga, every day there for a while. Are you still
Mm-hmm.
able to do it that much now, or is there other things that you're doing?
Yeah, mostly I do yoga and walk. So
Mm.
nothing hardcore. In my 20s, I was doing a lot of 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, sprint triathlons, like kind of more hardcore. And now I'm all about like, what can I do that's gentle? And what can I do that gets my body moving, that doesn't stress my body out, but that, you know,
So important.
yeah,
I think just to put a point on that too is that cortisol, going back to cortisol, is actually impacted a lot by exercise. And when we do this
yes,
hardcore exercise and we're already having issues with our cortisol, it ain't gonna be pretty, right? And it's just gonna
right.
exacerbate the situation versus doing things like yoga, obviously, that you're, bringing in your breath along with
Yes,
moving your body, right? And
yes,
that's a huge part of the calming aspect of it,
yes.
really,
Mm-hmm.
and walking, obviously, especially being outside in nature and connecting to the
Mm-hmm.
earth, is going to be super impactful on leveling out your adrenals and making your cortisol more happy and
Yes,
not like crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
for
And
sure.
it's pretty magical, that, I think sometimes it's hard for people. I don't want to say it's that easy because it's obviously not, but to incorporate some kind of body awareness, mindfulness, breath work, yoga connection, can shift a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot
Mm-hmm.
in these types of things, whether it's PMS or PMDD or
Mm-hmm.
other hormonal issues, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I know that you are starting, and actually by the time this is coming out, you'll have, I'm sure, probably have had an episode out or two, your own podcast on
Wait,
PMDD.
yes.
Yay!
Yay, it's
So very
exciting.
excited. Yeah, it's totally exciting. So, can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to do that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to create a resource for women who have PMDD, who suspect they have PMDD, or they know they're really moody around their period and they want to figure out what's up, of things that they can do. So we've kind of touched on a lot of things here in this episode, but like
Mhm.
really diving deep into food and diving deep into stress and supplements and all of those things. So yeah, just a way to support other people that are experiencing this and
So
giving them a tool
good.
and a resource.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so necessary. So, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
And where can people find the podcast?
It is going to be called Power Over PMDD. And at the moment, it should be on all the major directories. Is that how you call it?
I don't
Just
even know.
podcast players.
Podcast platforms, I think is what I say. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
all the
yeah,
platforms
yeah,
like iTunes
yeah,
and Stitcher and
yeah.
Spotify and all of those guys. Try
Nice.
and get it out everywhere is the goal.
Is the
So,
goal. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and for whoever's listening who is going to listen to that, if you're listening on iTunes, it's really helpful for newbies, all of us, just new on the podcast path, for you to leave reviews. Like, that is more than any payment could give us, because that's really the big way for our podcast to grow. So if you listen to
Yes.
Rebecca's, do that for her. If you listen on iTunes, I would appreciate that just as much as I appreciate you leaving us reviews here. So, and then if people want to contact you otherwise, where should they do that?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, Facebook, or Instagram at PMDD Health Coach. So,
Nice. And that I'll all be in the notes for people if you want to just go click on that and connect with Rebecca. So thank you so much for coming back on and sharing your
yeah.
story. I think it's so powerful for women to see that trajectory and to start to put those pieces together in their own mind about their own story, and a recognition of why they are where they are,
Yeah.
and it's not their body is being against them, or trying to take them down in any kind of way. It's like
Yeah.
it's often a lot of external things that happened as we were growing up that we didn't have choices in,
Yep.
that impacted us.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. Well, thanks for coming back on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, you guys, I will see you next time.